Hey everyone. In this episode, Rabbi Yosef, Kurtz, Chaim Rutman, and myself discuss a JTA article from 2021 called "The Data Don't Lie, Yeshiva High School Students Have a Binge Drinking Problem. Here's What We Can Do About It." This is by Rivka Press-Schwartz and Rabbi Tuli Hartstock from SAR High School. Hope you enjoy the conversation. Okay, so Rabbi Tuli Hartstock, Rivka Press-Schwartz wrote this article, I guess it's back in 2021, but it seems like the research they did was during COVID. That's what it looked like. So I don't know how much that impacted the situation, but here are the basic points I pulled out of the article. High school kids are Jewishly engaged, although I thought that those questions were a little weak. It's like, do you keep Shabbos all or most of the time? Like, to me, that's a pretty important chiluk right there. But they had, 90% of respondents. And they said they surveyed 3,500 10th to 12th graders over...
I think it was part of Scott Goldberg from Yeshiva University did a massive research study to teenagers in high school. And I think they used part of his research. They just took out across it. Because that's what today, if you do your doctorate at YU, if you do any type of quantitative research, it's all using Scott Goldberg's study. It's called the Jubilee study. And he surveyed thousands and thousands of teenagers. And I think this data must have been
pulled out of that.
It's my guess.
All right, it's possible. Point of the article was on substance abuse. So they said that kids reported lower amount of marijuana usage than the national average, but their big focus was on drinking. So 38% of high school kids say they have more than a sip or they had more than a sip of alcohol in the last 30 days. 19% binge drink, which was defined as 5 or more drinks in a sitting. And they also said that they figured out that, not surprisingly, teens with exposure to adults who have used substances are more likely to use substances themselves. So, like most of these studies, for those of us in the parsha of high school, Jewish high school kids, nothing surprising, right? Nothing stands out. If anything, the weed numbers being low would have stood out to me, although I don't know if that's where the American scene was, let's say in 2019, because weed's always been, Toronto is behind the States in everything except marijuana use. Like, that's the one thing Toronto's ahead of the States in, and always has been.
But I still think it's the case today.
Yeah.
I still think it's the case.
Yeah,
I think drinking at that age is ahead of weed today.
You think drinking still?
I still think so. I still think so. For whatever reason, maybe because of Shabbos, maybe because there's a lot of reasons why. Maybe you can hide it better.
More accessible in your house, right?
More accessible.
Parents don't have a weed cabinet. At least I don't think so, right? So there's that. That's there. And look, and let's get into it. I mean, it's a big part of our culture.
It's funny, and this conversation will take us to a lot of different places, I'm sure. The one thing that stands out that they didn't ask about, but it's 2019, so I have to remind myself, is gambling. Right? That's the one addiction that today we hear so much about on. It feels everything, and it wasn't here. But again, this is 2019. This is 7 years ago.
When were the gambling apps legalized in America?
Right.
After 2019.
Right. So you're right.
That made a huge difference. Mm-hmm. And I only started hearing about gambling here, I would say, post-COVID. That's when it started to explode in the high school.
Post-COVID, when it exploded in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because COVID, it was really, really big, right? People were stuck at home. They were online.
Sure.
Is there a gender divide with that, though?
With what?
See, like with alcohol, I mean, there are both, high school boys and girls who are drinking, right? And same with marijuana. But I don't know of too many high school girls who are gambling.
Anecdotally, I think much more boys.
Much more boys. For a lot of reasons. It's also, at that age, very social, right? Poker, especially.
Well, that's why I think drinking. That's why I think drinking is such a big. I mean, there's so many elements to this, right? So there's let's try and break them down, and we'll talk about each one. There's the communal element. There's the fact that we have a drinking, whether we like it or not. There's a drinking culture in our community, right? I mean, we get together in shul, we have kiddush. There's drinking. There was a movement a while ago for like dry kiddushes in the States, but certainly never took off here. And it's, even then there's still, people come home, people have kiddushes in their house. So drinking is a part of the culture. So that's one element of it. The other element of it is, if you're a teenager in high school, everything you're doing is your whole orientation on the world is social, right?
When you say that in the States there was something around dry kiddushes, does that mean that there were no kiddush clubs, or does that mean that at kiddush in general in the shul there was literally no booze?
Kiddush, no booze, right? Okay. Kiddush clubs is its own thing, depends on the rabbi and so on. But what you found, and I think COVID also did this, is a lot of people just started having kiddushes in their house. And if anything, that's even, I don't want to say worse, because we'll talk about how we judge it, but that is even more impactful because people are drinking in their house and having other people over to drink in their house. And so they're creating this like in our home culture of drinking, which is very present with your kids, right? And it really makes it okay. It's like mom is here, dad's here, the whole family's here. We're all part of this culture of drinking. So community is piece number one. Second piece is social. High school kids are social animals. This is the time for them. I mean, I've asked for the last 20 years, I've asked high school kids, what do you think the purpose of high school is? And the overwhelming answer is friends. Right? That's how high school kids see their experience. I am here to make friends, to figure out who I want to be friends with, to engage socially. And drinking is social lubricant. Right? It enables you to be more comfortable in social situations, which is the same reason why adults do it. Right? So they can be more comfortable in social situations, more so than other substances, more so than marijuana, or you might, end up, in a corner somewhere or whatever. But these are the things you do to make you comfortable. So I think the element of high school that is so focused on the social is tied to this. So that's another part of it. And then the third part of it, I think, is probably worth discussing.
So hold on. Two was social. One was
communal.
Communal, right? Yeah.
Right? And the third is, and this is kind of an outgrowth of the two, but I think we should talk about it in and of itself, is parties. Mm-hmm. Right? Is throwing parties in high school, and that element where you're really creating an environment where this is okay. Whether it's okay to drink at the party or show up to the party already drunk, or having drank, something like that. So I think we got to talk about those three elements.
There is another thing. I guess it could fall under social. Whenever I get into these conversations today, I always think that the 16, 18-year-old Chaim Rutman would beat the junk out of the 50-year-old Chaim Rutman, right? Because I was that guy on the other side of it. I think drinking makes you feel older. Right. Okay, and I don't know if that would be a social aspect, but we see our parents do, our fathers do it. We see in most cases we see older people doing it, and it's one of those things where you always want to act older than you are.
But that's new, right? Like, I mean, I can speak for like my father. My father would pour one shot to make kiddush on Shabbos, and that's what he would drink. And it was like, and it
I
was,
didn't grow up with any alcohol in my house.
Right. It was Jack Daniels, or that was the Crown equivalent in New York.
So I had a father who was always very, very responsible, but it seemed that alcohol never affected him. I didn't have I was a big guy, so it affected me, but I had to have a bunch for it to affect me. But I think that perhaps the levels are different, and you're not able to discipline yourself, but seeing people around having Kiddush Club, you just want to be part of that. And You don't understand on Shabbos, on Purim, for example.
Was there a Kiddush Club when you guys were growing up here?
Yeah.
So there was.
My shul had.
There was, where my shul was as well. But again, it was disciplined. I remember I had a Kiddush Club that I ran, when I was probably from the age of 20 to the age of 30. Okay, with my friends. And I have zero idea how they let us come to shul. I think about the things. I think about how that kiddush club was when we showed up to shul. We would basically roll in and roll right into kiddush club, and be the last ones to leave the shul. I was single for part of it, and part of it I was married. It was completely reckless. Completely reckless. You don't see kiddush clubs like that anymore. I mean, very often.
Right.
I don't see them anymore.
So what is it? Like, is it just the fact that Shabbos is the time where no one's going to drive? No one's going to do anything too crazy, let alone what it does to your family when you show up and you're drunk and whatever it might be. Like, what is it about our community that creates, let's just talk about adults for a second. Like, what creates this environment and this desire?
So can I just bring up one other thing?
Yeah.
I remember when I was in university, I had a group project, and I don't remember what we were. I think we were doing a group project on Crown Royal, maybe on some alcohol.
Group project on Crown Royal.
Could you have picked
Like a
worse
marketing.
alcohol?
It was a marketing class. Sorry, it was a marketing class, and we chose. It was some alcoholic beverage.
I have nightmares of those purple bags. I'm just
I'm
letting.
gonna guess it was Crown Royal. And the question got asked to the group: how often are you exposed to hard alcohol, like scotch? Like, how often does it come up? And for the most part, most of the people in the group said, like, at a party once in a while, or Christmas, Thanksgiving. And I said 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm like, what, 3 or 4 times a week? I was like, yeah, like in the morning, I go to shul, and at 7:30 in the morning,
Right.
someone died 10 years ago. So you have a muffin that's cut into 4 from Hermes, and a shot of Crown Royal, and then you go to work.
And a piece of herring.
And a piece of herring. A piece of pickled fish, whatever. And you go to work. And everyone's like, whoa, I got to join your religion. Like, got to get in on that. But that to me, like, I would guess that the average Jewish person is exposed. Maybe the average frum person is exposed at a higher rate. But I actually think, and I'd have to be checked on this, I actually think the alcoholism rate in the Jewish community is lower than a national average, which I think might be a byproduct of other demographic and
How would you even know that number though accurately?
I'm sure it's been studied. I'd have.
But how many functioning alcoholics are there in the Jewish community that are just not
correct
saying, "Oh,
that
I have
was
a
the
drinking
point I was going to
problem."
bring up. Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. That how many are in our community walking around as functioning alcoholics that we hide, and that's what's that's what is really the problem, because that's what the children are seeing that sometimes nobody else sees at home. Is like a guy gets home after 18 shots at Kiddush, and how's he acting to his family at home? And I think, like, I'm curious to know what those rates actually are, and if there is a possibility of having a healthy drinking culture, or if we've really gone down this dark path that we have to really address as a community, that there's just far too much alcohol exposure in our communal events every Shabbos, a few times a week, etc.
So let's break that down. On our last podcast, for those who are multiple users, multiple listeners, we spoke about, for the 2 of them out there, we spoke about going to shul and what brings us to shul, and besides for the tefillah, besides for the religious, and we spoke about the fact that it's social. And for a lot of people it is. So when we talk about Kiddush Club, when we talk about the drinking, yes, sitting around with your friends, that's part of the shul atmosphere, especially people with a couple of kids, people that are working. You don't get a lot of social time. Okay, so that 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock in shul is your social time with your friends, sitting around after shul. It's the disciplines that are done within the shul that will control that. So again, is it so bad to have alcohol at a kiddush? Maybe not. However, I know in the shul that I daven at, for example, you can't have a kiddush without a sar mashkin. You can't have a kiddush without somebody actually pouring the booze. Okay, this way the person can see no one's pouring full glasses of alcohol. And even if it's a simcha, you either have somebody pouring the booze or you have a bartender. You're pouring shots. You recognize if there are kids. You recognize if there are full glasses. And there's control. I know in our shul there is no kiddush club. It's just the rabbi has set that rule down before I even started davening there, and everybody respects it. So I don't know if it's such an issue of alcohol being so prevalent in shul as much as perhaps alcohol being prevalent in shuls when there's no discipline.
Let's answer this question first. Is our relationship as a community of adults with alcohol okay, healthy, what we want to pass on to our children? Because I think that's at the core in some way of this question, right? It's like, how upset are we that our children are buying into this culture when this is a culture that we really enjoy, right? And by we, I don't mean those of us sitting around this table. I mean just in general. Like these, like you just said, this is a feature of shul life. Whether your shul has a Sarah Mashkim, doesn't have a Sarah Mashkim, has a Kiddush club, doesn't have a Kiddush club, this is part of the adult life of Jewish communal living, right? This is when the survey says, 85% of kids, are engaged Jewishly, we essentially want our children to grow into this culture. So is this a thing that we're okay with for adults and we just want to delay for children? Or is this a problem in the adult culture itself?
I think it's a problem. Just what we've just talked about around this table is at social functions, and we're a social community, Jewish people, we have shul, and alcohol often is at the center of that. Don't we all try to educate our children, like, you don't need alcohol to have fun? But then they look at us and say, like, okay, but every time you're with your friends, you have alcohol to have fun. And if that's the case, then we're signaling to our children that you do need alcohol to have fun. I just want to bring up one more piece that point number 4, I think, which we talked about. You brought up community, social, and parties. I'm going to use a coin. I don't know if this was a term. I don't know if this was coined by David Bashevkin or he uses it a lot. Gvir culture. I think also when it comes to alcohol, there is a problem from a socioeconomic perspective of needing the best, of having to have, if you don't bring, today it's not single malt, but if you don't bring Reserva, the best tequila, the best bottle of wine, you're a less than. And you have to get the, and I think that's also from a signaling perspective to our children, a very dangerous path to go down.
Okay, but you said it yourself. These are all things we engage with. They are features of our lives. Yeah. Right? And are they like, if they're problematic features of our lives, where do we draw the line? Like what would a healthy Jewish community relationship with alcohol look like? Like, is it no alcohol? Is it everyone just stops drinking? Now, again, I don't know that that's possible. I mean, it's the same,
Is it not as simple as be careful not to expose the kids to it? Like, is that not a simple way of looking at this sometimes?
So
you're sitting at the Shabbos table.
Right.
Okay. And again, this has happened to me. So, okay. We all learn from our mistakes, or many mistakes. Don't get drunk in front of your kids. Don't plaster the guests with wine or booze. Don't drink obsessively in shul. Like, does it have to be all or nothing, or is it more careful as to what you're putting in front of people? No, I don't think it has to be all or nothing,
but I'm challenging us to sort of really identify a line, because I think what our kids see is this is fun. This is how you enjoy yourself, and you know what? It is. Like, it actually is how adults enjoy themselves. It helps make a Shabbos meal more fun because people are looser and they're less apprehensive. So many people have anxiety, social anxiety. Right? Alcohol helps with social anxiety. Right? I mean, we've had this conversation, teaching both boys and girls. When you get to boys and girls drinking together, and we'll talk about this, we talk about parties, but get to boys and girls drinking together at parties, right? You run into problems. What's going to happen? Are you going to run into an issue of consent if, that teenage boy and girl are engaging in any sort of, physical relationship, right? Well, adults do that all the time. All the time, adults drink to help take away their inhibition, right? Even with their spouses. Like this is, it's a complicated issue because the thing that we're doing is actually something that we value. It helps us in these situations. And I think I think we all know the line when it's crossed, right? It's like that Supreme Court justice with like, I know pornography when I see it, right? The difference between art and pornography. Like we know the line when somebody's stumbling through shul and, it has to be carried home, right? That line we know. But where do we draw the line when it's just a lot of social drinking? And kids will take that too far, but they see that as something that the adults in my life value.
I'll add one more. I mean, it's not only social. I mean, it's also religious, right? When I'm going to a wedding, I'm going to dance. I'm going to be more lebedik if I drink. If I go to an oneg, I'm going to sing louder if I drink. This idea, it's not only social, it's enhancing the experience of whatever experience that you're in at that time. So you're celebrating it on many different levels. It's not just a social level. It's, for lack of a better term, cool as well. Like you say, fun. It's also cool. Like, I'm drinking. There's a lot of different pieces here. There's no question. There's a lot of different pieces.
Right. And there's something about, so there's also poison, by the way. Like it's all bad for you, right? Like even here as we're drinking wine, like it's all like, you can have small amounts of poison or large amounts of poison, but poison, alcohol is like there was a while ago where they used to think like, a glass of wine a day is healthy for you. That's all debunked. Like it's all bad for you, like in terms of physically. Right. But at the same time, we're willing to engage with it. So maybe we're talking about a different type of conversation with our kids, which is, this is something you need to engage with when you're older and you can choose to do it on your own terms. You understand risk better, but that's hard for teenagers because all teenagers will figure out ways to try out being adults.
So I ask the two educators in the room, when you're dealing with the kids, how do you deal with them on an educational level? Do you feel that the answer is to just completely distance them from it? Is the answer to educate them of what the evils are and let them make their own decisions? Like what do you feel the answer is? Because we see different schools and we see different educators deal with it different ways.
When I was principal, this was my philosophy, that a school is an institution that has stakeholders to protect, right? And a school has to represent an ideal of something. So from a school perspective, the policy should be absolutely zero. Now, the question then becomes, to what extent does the school extend its reach into what happens at home?
That's right.
And that's always been, in my experience, a divide between the modern Orthodox community and the yeshivish community, where the yeshivish community is much more willing to extend its reach into how its students are behaving in the community. And modern Orthodox schools are a little more hesitant, and they'll say, look, if this is what a kid's doing at home, outside of school hours, outside of the school walls, that's between them and their parents. But at the same time, I don't think schools are the primary influence here. I think parents are the primary influence. I think this doesn't, this is a thing that every magazine and podcast could talk about. It is going to change when individual parents make a decision. And that's why I keep coming back to this, kind of I'll pose the question this way. How much do parents mind that their kids are drinking? Nobody wants their kid getting drunk. Nobody wants their kid getting into a car when they're drunk, right? But how much do parents in our community genuinely mind that their kids are drinking? I know parents who give alcohol to their kids.
So I think it's like anything else in this area. I think parents try to be liberal until it becomes a problem. And then all of a sudden they become, obviously, against it. Okay? But I think that parents are not as vigilant when it comes to this as schools are. Okay? I just don't think they are. I don't know about parents giving alcohol to kids or not giving alcohol to kids, but I think it's like this in most things in life. It's not on your radar until it affects you yourself, For most people. I'm not saying for everybody, and I'm not condemning anybody. Everybody's got their own things that they have to worry about. But when it hits home to them, whether it's in the form of an event, God forbid, or whether it's in the form of a reputation of a school or whatever it is, then everybody gets around and starts talking about it. Otherwise, I don't think it's on people's radar. It doesn't feel that way. Rabbi, what do you think?
I think there's a wide range of opinions and perspectives when it comes to this. That's just from what I hear from people, and on a personal experience, like my parents would have killed me if they knew I had a sip of alcohol in high school, and I had friends whose parents maybe were on the looser end in that spectrum, where they were, okay, did they get drunk? Did they get behind the car? Were they with girls? Like, more like questions like that. And if not, like, I'm not going to kill my kid, but I'll tell them alcohol's bad and the dangers, etc. I don't think parents want their kids drinking. Your question was different, though. How much do they really care? I think it depends on the parent and the situation. I think that most parents have given up on Purim, basically saying, okay, I'm not going to fight this battle. This is once a year. And my kid will drink on Purim, and many parents give their kids alcohol on Purim. I'm not going to say, but I heard directly from a teacher of a school telling a parent, giving parents instructions, you should give your child what you're comfortable with them drinking, pour vodka into a water bottle for them to take with them, and that's all they can have for the day. This is coming from an educator telling a parent, this is how you should handle Purim, is, tell them this is what you can have, no more, and you could have this amount. So I think, it really does depend, and it varies. But this is very touchy in many ways because of the exposure issue. Like, it's always around and it's always there. And even people who have a healthy, quote unquote, relationship with alcohol, I'm going to have some wine on Shabbos and I have a one glass of wine at my Shabbos Suda, which, I think many people would look at as being fairly healthy. Even that, it's around, and what are you signaling to your child? Are you signaling to your child, I can't get through my Shabbos Suda without it? Or are you signaling to your child, this is a nice way to enhance my, my Simcha on Shabbos, and it's nice? And
I think people think the latter.
Yes.
I think people think that's what I'm signaling, and they may be.
And
they may actually be signaling that. But again, teenagers are teenagers. So they're going to experiment. They're going to take things to extremes. Look, what was your first time getting drunk in your life? My first time was I went
Yeshiva.
to Masifta in Queens, right? And grade 9 Purim with my Rebbe. It was the first time I got drunk. My brother found me on Main Street talking to a garbage can and brought me home. And he was married already. So he pushed me into the house. He knew my mother would freak out, right? I ended up throwing up all over the sheets I slept in, right? And then threw them in the dumpster off the block because I didn't want my mother to
Same garbage can that you were talking to?
For years, my mother would be like, I always wonder what happened to those other burgundy sheets we had. Where could they have just disappeared to? But and again, no influence from home, but I tried it, right? And it was experiment. And it was actually pretty formative because it was a long time. I mean, it wasn't the last time I got, drunk like that, but it was a long time since then. Meaning I didn't like the experience. It was a really bad experience. But I think that's the natural flow of it is you demonstrate, hey, this is part of being an adult. Kid wants to try out being an adult, and they try it. I want to get to a pet peeve of mine. Okay, what do you guys think about parents who say this? And I've heard this many times. It's better that my kids drink with me watching. Right? This gets into the party culture a little bit, right? It's like I'll have the party at my house, and I'll be there, and I'll host it, so I can watch, right, and be on top of it. And it's healthier if I'm watching than if my kid's sneaking around and doing this.
Here's what I believe. I think that there is some truth to that statement and some falsehood to that statement. It's true for the, let's call it 20% of teenagers who, if they don't have a safe place to do it, will do much worse things in much worse places. Talking about like, find a park somewhere and do things that
like we did, not you, right? But like people of kids,
hello.
yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Kids of our generation did,
Sure.
right? In a park,
Yeah.
because we would never do it at home because our parents would never
Yeah.
have been okay with it.
Yes,
So
yes.
that was worse, and I think that's where it comes
Yeah.
from. For a lot of people in our generation, it comes from the fact that I know what I did,
Sure.
and I was sneaking around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, for the other 75%, 80% who now attend the party, who like, if not given the party, would probably be home watching TV or just crying that they don't have better plans, that gives them access to a whole new world of call it, potentially dangerous behavior. And I'm not saying, every party is created differently, so there's not like one size fits all for this answer. But I think that some parents are justified in saying like, okay, I want to supervise it and monitor and make sure it doesn't get so bad. But the problem is what that gives permission and opens the door to for that child and for all the other children that would not have been exposed to that, because many would not go drinking in the park. Who was back in the day, where was the worst place you could hang out in Toronto? And I think it's still true to this day. What do you say?
What do you mean? Where did we hang out back?
The degenerates. Where did the degenerates hang out?
What would you say?
The Max Plaza, Chabad
I was
Gate.
before you. For me, it was the pool hall, Lawrence and
The
Bathurst.
pool hall, Lawrence.
Yeah. That was a beauty. But go ahead. Yeah.
Just I would never have been caught dead there. Like I just knew that wasn't the place for me. I actually found myself there once, and I was like, this is awful. Like I don't want to.
Yosef, why was that?
Why was what?
Why would you never have been caught dead there? What was it about you and your sort of orientation to the world that gave you that? Because Chaim and I would have been there.
I was arranging.
It just was sketchy, skeevy. Like it was gross. I'll tell you, the first time I ever had alcohol, it was a similar type of situation. Like me and my friends snuck out of our houses at 3 a.m. on a Motzei Shabbos. And I want to be careful not to get anyone in trouble who's currently Rabbi in places, learning in Kollel and Lakewood, whatever, all over. But we got together at 3 a.m, and someone a couple years older than us, who I now teach his children, bought us beer. He had a fake ID. He bought us beer, and we went to someone's backyard. We made a barbecue and had beer. And we whispered the whole time because we knew if any of us got caught, like, we were toast. Like we were done. No way our parents would have all killed us. It wasn't in a park. It was 4 or 5 guys. It was like we were all in yeshiva. We were fine. We were like, that was the first time I ever quote like experimented with alcohol. But I never would have gone to a sketchy like that. Just wasn't.
So that my argument is that's what you're articulating, and I'm gonna give it back to you through my lens. Is exactly why I think this argument of it's better when kids drink under my roof and with me watching is complete garbage. Because I think what we lose sight of, and maybe this is true even generationally, what we have lost sight of with our kids, what we lose sight of is the fact that when we say to our kids, this is completely unacceptable for you, and maybe it's unacceptable for you just because you're 16, 17, 18 years old, and you're not an adult yet, and there's certain things that you just have to wait till you're an adult to do. When we deliver that message, the orientation that our kids have is what I'm doing now is bad. And it's better that they do that in a park somewhere where their frame of reference for the authority in their life, for the voices of authority in their life, is what I'm doing is wrong. Because first of all, it will keep young, innocent Yosef Kurtz most of the time away from it. So what you call the 75% will be more away from it, that culture, because they'll never go to those areas or those places. And even the 25% who will go, right, are actually still better off because their frame of reference is still what I'm doing now is wrong. If I get caught, I'm in deep blank, right? Like this is bad for me, as opposed to what I'm doing now is actually okay. My parents have signed off on it, right? And maybe, if I go too far, they'll put me to bed.
Okay.
But
so
in the end, I've delivered a very clear message that this is
let me
wrong.
propose scenario A, scenario B. Scenario A is a Purim party, co-ed, no supervision, in a home. Parents are out of town, and there's just alcohol flowing like a Achashverosh's party, like crazy. Right. Scenario B is a parent says, you know what, I'm going to have the Purim party. I'm not going to serve anything. I'm going to monitor, make sure girls don't get, girls don't get hurt. I'm going to monitor, make sure like things stay somewhat above board. Now, in those two scenarios, where do you want your child going?
I think it's a false binary.
Right.
Okay, because what you're doing is you're setting up the situation where you're saying those are two inevitable outcomes, but they're not two inevitable outcomes, right? It's not two inevitable outcomes that my kid is either going to be at my supervised party or going to be at the unsupervised party, right? The two scenarios more appropriately articulated are in one scenario, I'm telling my kid, it's okay if you drink as long as I'm watching you. In scenario B, I'm telling my kid it is never okay for you to drink. You're too young for this. This is unhealthy for you. This is going to lead to bad choices. Now, it is possible that I will have that kid, like the me or Chaim, who's just going to sneak around and do that, right? But that kid still knows. If my child, sadly, is in that minority, the answer is not then, okay, I need to make the party for my child. The answer is I need to make sure I'm doing my best to convey that message to my child. And when they mess up, they understand that they messed up, that this was a big deal, right? That they have violated my trust, that I'm the orientation of what's safe in their lives. And this is why all the studies, right, say one of the things, you should talk to your kids about sex. You should talk to your kids about drugs. You should talk to your kids about drinking. Why? Why is this the thing? It's not just, nice advice. All the studies show that when a kid is in a dangerous situation, when a child's in a dangerous situation, the first frame of reference in their mind is who is the person they trust the most for their safety. And that message, if you've delivered to your child, this is wrong, then that's the message they're gonna hear. Now they might violate it, they might push those boundaries, but that ultimately that doesn't therefore justify, right, doing it in the first place.
I agree.
Right? The actual binary is between, do you tell your child this is wrong or do you tell your child it's right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm in poker terms, I'm playing the button, right? I get to see how everybody acts, and then I can feed in. I'm conflicted. I really am. I'm struggling with the answer here, and I hear all that, and to me the Purim conversation is a little bit different than the rest of the year. It is. I mean, I never understand the parties throughout the year, right? And it happens a couple of times a year where this guy's parents are having a party or this one's out of town and they allowed them to. I'll never understand that part. When it comes to Purim, the protection mode sort of kicks in for me, okay? And I understand that idea of I'm going to make sure that the kids are as safe as I can possibly make them because they are going to end up. Now, in Rabbi Kurtz's scenario, perhaps the choices aren't as cut and dry, but over the last couple of years, they have been. I know of discussions that went on. The kids were going to Airbnb a house, okay, to throw a Purim party. And to say that, at least in Rutman land, okay, to say, okay, drinking is bad, don't go. I know I would have had a difficult time listening to those instructions, and I think my kids would as well. So to be able to protect them rather than regret it later and deal with the consequences, even though perhaps it is a learning opportunity, if there is trouble that comes up, they see it for next time, and here I'm protecting them from that.
Let me ask you a question, though. Go back to our generation, okay? Let's say it was one of our parents who knew my kid's the kid, right? Like, you know your kid, right? My kid's the kid who's not going to listen. My kid's the kid who's going to do it, right? What would our parents have done? Like, what would their reaction have been if they knew that? If they knew, because sometimes our parents were out to lunch and didn't actually know what was happening. But if they knew it, would their reaction have been to throw the party, or would their reaction have been to say, I'm following you around. I'm doing this for your safety. I'm doing this because I love you. But you're not going out of my sight.
You know,
Didn't you do that? Didn't you go in the limo?
I didn't go in the limo only because the yeshiva wouldn't let me talk to any of the kids. I don't remember spending any Purims in yeshivas. I think they always threw me out right before yeshiva started, right before Purim, in order to protect themselves.
I told you they have stakeholders.
They were careful. They were smart. I think, look, it ages us for me to say this, even Rabbi Kurtz. Kids are different today.
Are kids different, or are we different? Are
Society's different.
we softer?
We're softer for sure, but
Right.
but the cat's out of the bag. Like, how do we walk it back now?
It's not hard. I'll tell you how.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
How's that for an answer?
How old are your kids?
No, I get it.
How old is your oldest?
I get it. He's 11.
Okay, let's have this conversation in 6 years.
I get it. I I totally get it. Okay, I'm not there as a parent. I understand. Right? 20 years of high school, though. I get some
Right.
some
Yeah.
street cred for teaching high school for 20 years. But I'm telling you, I don't see the answer being yes as the solution. I think, first of all, I think you have to trust your kid, right? I think you have to, your first step is trust until your kid loses their trust, right? And look, I get sometimes it gets really bad, right? And Yosef and I have certainly seen those situations where there's a full breakdown in relationship between home and child and how that goes. But those are the exceptions, right? Those are not the norm. Most kids still trust their parents to provide them the right guidance on their safety. And even when they bend those rules, right, and they push, they still orient themselves toward their parents for their safety. So I think we started this conversation by saying this is a cultural feature of adult living in the Jewish community. We have to recognize that. We have to recognize that whether we like it or not, unless we want to go, cold turkey, we're sending some messages, which are in some sense normal, quote unquote, messages about the role of alcohol in social life. Right? And the fact that it's a social lubricant, and the fact that it enables people to have a good time, and the fact that we as adults have parties and we drink at those parties, and there is such a thing as responsible drinking, or at least we feel we can do that and conduct ourselves as adults in responsible ways, right? And we can convey that message to our children, right? But we can also say it's not appropriate for you at this age, maybe because it's just illegal. Right?
I mean,
Maybe because it's.
I speak very openly, sometimes I would say even harshly this year, about the co-ed drinking. I think that when I was in high school, I never drank in a co-ed setting, and when I finished high school, I committed myself that I would never drink in a co-ed setting. I don't think I had a sip of alcohol with a woman until I was married, or at least until I was engaged. I think Purim when I was engaged, and I was at a couple's Purim Suda, and I had some alcohol there. But I think to me that is my big cross to bear, is like that I think that's we've seen also, we talked about as educators, we've seen when it goes as bad as it can go. We've seen what can happen. I've seen what can happen when a girl gets drunk and is vulnerable around drunk or sober males. I've seen the worst that can happen in those situations. I've seen girls and boys get their acceptances to yeshiva and seminary taken away. I've seen years later stories of a party coming to haunt someone when it comes to shidduchim. I saw recently a boy who broke up with a girl he was dating for 3 months because somebody told him this is what she did in high school at a party. These are real situations. This is people's real lives getting ruined at these situations. And I think that, at least me, I think if we're talking about what to educate our children and how to talk to them about this, I think it needs to start there. Is that you talk about like, when does it cross the line? Well, this is when it crosses the line. It shouldn't happen. I told a boy in class this year raised his hand and said, "Well, Rabbi, I'm gonna end up in this situation. I'm gonna end up at one of these parties. How do I do it in the most kosher way?" I said, "Don't." Like, the answer is no. He said, "But I'm gonna be there. How do I do it the most kosher way?" I said, "Stand in a corner, bring it to Hillim, and stay to Hillim in a corner the whole time."
That's what I did.
Daven for your neshama. I said that's what you should do, because this is wrong. This is wrong, and I'm calling out a wrong. And that, to me, like, there's a lot of gray area here. There's a lot of gray area. There is when it comes to these conversations, Kiddush Club and Kiddushim and Toa Meha and weddings and vorts and all these, Pesachs and the Gvir Club. There's a lot of gray area. But this, to me, is
But that's my
not
point.
a gray
Meaning,
area.
I think all of that is true. And I think that's precisely why when you're an adult, the answer has to be exactly what you just articulated. My policy as an adult is this is never okay for you when you're 18, 19, or whatever age you want to put on it. And again, it doesn't mean that kids aren't going to do it anyway. And it doesn't mean that you as a parent can't know that my kid might be doing this anyway. But the message you're delivering is unequivocally, this is not okay. And it's okay for me because there's certain things that are okay for adults and that are not okay for children, right? And that's like all of their lives as children is that.
But it really resonates with me what the rabbi just said. In other words, there's the conversation of don't drink because it's bad. Okay, it's poison. Okay, don't drink because it's illegal. Okay, but don't drink because it could have repercussions in the future. Okay, on reputation, on where you go to school, on decisions that are going to be made years later. I like the idea of explaining it that way.
That is the most quintessentially Jewish community argument that has ever existed. Don't do this because of how it's going to reflect on you. Now, I take nothing away from it because, by the way, in this situation, whatever argument works, if that works in your world, in your life, it will give you a downside to that argument.
Yeah.
The downside to that argument is then what happens when a kid does it? Then you're flipping the argument and you're saying it's really okay. You can pick yourself up. You can be a new person. You can do something again. Part of the problem is that argument reinforces scenarios in our world where kids can't get out of reputations, and especially young women can't get out of reputations, right? Because we have put the reputation. As I remember my first year at Bnei Akiva schools, and the speech that the person who was in charge of Opana many years ago gave to the girls was before Purim was, be mindful of what your reputations are. And everyone walked away from that. All the other administrators that was amazing. It was so amazing you delivered that message. And I was uncomfortable with it. And it wasn't because I was uncomfortable because I thought that girls should be able to drink. I was uncomfortable because that reputation consistently reinforces this idea that reputation is the most important thing. And then there's some kids who, for various biochemical nurture, upbringing reasons, have less impulse control and mess up. And then those kids are caught by the dynamic that we built when we put reputation as the most important thing.
But Hillel, and this piece hits home with me very much so. You're right. You're right in that if it happens, the pieces will have to be picked up and you have to help it. But is it so wrong to tell kids, or is it not effective to tell kids? It's going to be tougher.
I agree.
It's just going to be tougher.
I agree with you.
It's not a matter that if you do this, life is over. It's not a matter of if you do this, you're ever going to be seen this way. But it could take, what do they say? It takes 5 minutes to ruin a reputation and 5 years to earn it back.
I agree. And those are real facts of life.
I think that, and a lot of kids, I know that when I was a kid, no matter how many times it was said to me by as many people as it was said to me, it never hit home. It never hit home until, you pass the point of no return, and then you start seeing how hard it's going to be to get your way back. And it's hard to get your way back. But that might be today one of the only things that hit home with kids.
I agree, and I want to be. I really do agree, and I think because it's true. It's not.
And even
it's not
today,
a contrived
I
message.
gotta say, when you and I were growing up, and I know I don't have to tell you this, but I have to say it out loud, there was no Instagram.
No.
There was no Facebook. No one took videos of us and sent it around. Reputation. I don't know about Hella Rap, but certainly Chaim Rutman came with its own reputation back in the day. Today, at any party or at anything, you take one video of somebody doing something, it could get around. I think that could be one of the biggest learning for kids.
And yet, though, right? Because Yosef, you and I have been part of this for years. We give that speech to kids all the time. One video, what's on the internet never gets taken off. What's been the adolescent response to that?
Probably the opposite of what we would have expected. There's
Which
more
is?
more parties, more Instagram, more
So
TikTok.
here's
In other
my-
words, I don't care.
So here's my-
the answer is like I now, and this is you call this like the Donald Trumpification of the world. Like the idea that scandal doesn't matter anymore. That what I say, 5 times a day, Donald Trump says something that any prior president would have been a career-ending scandal,
Even
right?
today.
These
Even
kids
today.
live in a world where I think they're looking at us and saying, "Yeah, we just live in this world where we video."
So I have
everything."
to ask you a question. We've said a lot here so far, and there's going to be a lot more said. But there's the conversation of don't, and there's the conversation of I understand you're going to, so be careful. I've heard educators say in the past, I don't tell them not to because it could push them farther away. So I try to explain it to them and work with them, okay, rather than say no, because if I say no, it'll just make things worse between relationship
Can
with
I ask you a
kid.
question? Can you say 2 things at the same time? I love you. I love you dearly. And if you are ever in trouble, I want you to call me, and I will not judge you. I will not ask any questions. I will be there for you. But my answer to you, if you tell me, should I do this, is no. Is that such a hard line to walk? Because I'll tell you what I see as principal. I see a lot of educators who want to be popular with kids. I see a lot of educators who are reliving high school experiences themselves. And we live in a world where our advancement in the field of Jewish education is very tied to being popular. It is very tied to being the person the kids like. Who are the rebbeim that get good feedback from parents to the school, or the teachers who get good feedback from parents to school? It's the teachers who my kids come home and say, I love that teacher, they're awesome, they're cool. And so I think there's a lot of misaligned incentives here. And I think you can show a kid that you love them without condoning what you think is inappropriate behavior. Now, look, coming back to your point, I get you on the reputation piece. I still think that if I'm talking to a young person and to my own children when the time comes, my answer is it's illegal, right? I don't want you breaking the law, right? I don't want you getting in trouble. This is unhealthy for your developing brain, right? When you're an adult, you're going to get to choose what you do with your brain. It's unhealthy for your brain as an adult too, but you get to make that choice when you're an adult. While you're a kid, I can't tell you this is okay. Now, if you do it, I want you to know you can always trust me, right? And I'll always be there for you.
I want to ask you both a question. Are we talking here about a problem that is widespread? Or are we talking about a problem that is affecting a very, very small group, but we want to address it as a whole, right? Like in my class, there was only one Chaim Rutman, and there were 35 kids in my class. Mm-hmm. I would say in my age group, there might have been 3 Chaim Rutmans out of 5 schools. So it's not like we're dealing with. It's the same thing with gambling, right?
Well, what was the number? What percentage of teenagers are binge drinking?
So he had 20%.
Okay,
Because that's a problem.
He had
So hold on.
20%.
I'm
20%. That's a big number.
It's true, but that number to me it's a little bit of a it's not giving me all the information, right? Like, so they binge drink 5 drinks, and I'm not.
That's a lot.
I'm not making that light, but is that once a year on Purim, or is that every week?
Oh, it's in the last.
So I think they had in the last 30 days.
last
Okay.
30 days.
Right.
Okay.
Now, again, I want to validate what you're saying because, and this is, I think, what we started with. It's either a problem or it's not a problem. Now, if parents want to be honest with themselves and say, I don't care if my kid drinks, I'm okay with that. I drink, my kid drinks. I drank when I was a kid. I'm okay with that. If that's the answer, then we're not having a conversation anymore.
This
right?
is
In other words, the point is, like, we first have to determine, because like we said, adults do this all the time. Adults do it for very much the same reasons that our children are doing it, right? As a social lubricant, as a way to loosen up, to have a good time, to be social, all of those things, right? So our kids are mirroring us, maybe being a little more extreme because that's what teenagers do, but they're mirroring us. And if the answer is, this is not a problem, I'm okay with it, right? And yes, there are going to be some downsides and there are going to be kids who take it too far and there's going to be, okay, then that's the answer. But then we should say that, right? We should articulate, I am okay with my child drinking. But if we're not okay with it, if we think it's unhealthy, then we have to be consistent with that.
So I'm going to say things, I try to always watch what I say most of the time. I think people are, when it comes to their kids, a lot of people are selfish, okay? And I think everybody cares about everybody else. I think when there's a problem in the community, this is a community that rallies around problems, and I'm very proud to be part of it. But I think in this scenario, people are selfish. So I don't think it's an issue that people are okay with it. It's like I said earlier. I think what affects people, I think when it becomes a problem for their kid, all of a sudden it becomes the biggest issue. I had a friend of mine.
Let me ask you this question. What's more important, not to you, but if this is your choice, my child's popularity, my child being in the in crowd, is that worth me increasing the risk of my child drinking? Would I rather my child be unpopular, but yet following the rules, than my child breaking rules and being popular? Because I see a lot of parents who are really invested in their children's social lives.
Today, I mean, our parents couldn't have cared less.
No,
we
not
could
at
have
all.
sat. We could have sat in a room reading Archie comics.
This goes back to my argument, right? That I think there was something healthy about this distance that our parents had with us. And it wasn't because our parents did it intentionally, because they had great parenting theories, right? But there was something fundamentally healthy about that we've lost in our efforts to engineer our children's lives for them.
But I got to tell you this one story, and it sticks with me. I had a friend of mine a couple of years ago. His kid was gambling, okay? And he was gambling with a bunch of friends. And they were gambling, they were skipping school, they were gambling till all hours of the night, okay? Till all hours of the night, online, in person, lying about it, somebody being away. And my friend, picked up the phone, okay? My friend found out that his kid had lost some significant amounts of money. He picked up the phone and called the other parents and said, look, I'm just letting you know. He said, I'm not blaming you. You did nothing wrong. But my friend said to them, look, at the end of the day, I feel that I would want people to tell me, so I'm telling you what you're doing. And I thought my friend did the right thing. The response from the parents were, you have a problem with your kid. My kid didn't do that. My kid's not doing that. Now, I guarantee you, if there was an issue and they had lost lots of money, it would be the worst thing in the world, and all the other kids would be awful. I think my friend did the right thing by calling the parents. I was surprised by their reaction when my buddy told me, because what it showed me was, it's not an issue right now. If it becomes an issue, then I'll become, and then I'll become strong in it. I think it speaks to the whole point of it. It's not an issue that we're okay or we want our kids to drink. But until it checks a box of fear, I got enough things to worry about.
My father wouldn't let us play dreidel for pennies on Hanukkah.
My father never understood the theory of gambling at all. Of everything I struggled with, gambling was the worst. And I haven't played, I don't think, a hand of blackjack now in probably over 30 years. Poker's a different story, but blackjack behind the 30
Game of skill.
30 years. But again, I think to your point, I think that until it affects me,
Yeah,
I don't
think you're right.
realize how scary it can be. Now, once I see it in my home or I see it in somebody who's close to me's home, all of a sudden I got to go into lockdown mode and it becomes the worst thing in the entire world. But until I see that,
Yeah.
that mama bear piece doesn't kick in. And I think
Yeah.
I really do think it's part
I
of
see
it.
that. I see that all the time with parents.
I think a lot of people look at drinking that way. Okay, my kid's going to go to an Oneg and drink. Okay, he had some vodka in a water bottle. Okay, that was terrible. I'll tell him not to do it again. Probably does it again. He drinks loud. He's got, he looks good most of the time. Okay. If it becomes a real issue, all of a sudden, I guarantee you, the school leaders are getting phone calls from that parent every day saying, how can you let it happen?
To what extent do parents feel trapped? Meaning, to what extent would parents like to be able to say to their kids, just unequivocally, this is not okay, and I'm not okay with it. But I feel trapped by the fact that all the other kids' parents are okay with
I
it.
get this. I get these phone calls all the time.
This is the beauty of being a parent. I think adults are like this also, right? Why are adults any different than kids?
We're not.
We all want to be part, or a lot of us want to be part of something. Okay, either we're on the side that is involved or the side that isn't involved. I think it's natural. And kids, of course, want to be involved. They want to go. If I don't go, then I'm going to be left out.
And in fairness, I don't have any social sense. Like, I don't have friends. Like, I don't have like a crew of people.
You got us.
Who, I know, I appreciate that.
Yosef.
No, but I don't, and I don't care. Like, I'm not that person in communally. Like, I didn't, I'm not sensitive to those things, but people are. For people, like, being in a crowd is really important. So
I've been through this with all of my kids in one way or another. All of my kids, where you have to make hard decisions of, am I going to let them go to this party? Do I send them to this camp? Do I send them to this school? This is where their friends are. This is where they want to be. These are hard decisions.
right.
I mean, this is why we get paid the big bucks as parents.
But at the end of the day, do we believe that any of this changes at any institutional or communal level? Or is this, at the end of the day, just people making decisions to, change the way they approach this issue with their children?
I see institutions dealing with this issue very, very differently.
So let's talk about that for a
I
minute.
see some
How should
schools-
institutions deal with this issue?
So we spoke about this earlier, and I stayed quiet, which is very hard for me. But when you talk about schools being worried about what goes on outside of their gates, right? So some schools are very particular about the way people act outside of the school. And some schools say, look, that's the parent job. But as well, it's a problem for the school sometimes because it looks badly on the school if certain things happen, right? If certain things happen at weddings, okay, and a lot of the kids got drunk or other things, it looks bad on the school, okay? While on the other hand, it could look great on the school, right? So it's a fine line of choosing what you want to be involved in that goes on outside of the school. I know certain schools that say, for example, on Purim, we're not allowing any booze at all. If we find out you drank, you're going to be in trouble. If we found out you did this, you're going to be... And we find some schools, without naming any, that not only are you not going to get into trouble, but it's almost celebrated. Okay, and so I'm not here to judge any one school or any one administrator or I'm not here to judge anyone, but everybody deals with it differently. When you ask that question, are you asking it on an institutional level or on a parent level?
So I think at the end of the day, schools and institutions in general are reactive to who their stakeholders are, right? And in, let's say, your right of center yeshivish world, if a boy goes to his Rebbe's house on Purim and is drinking, it's not really going to blow up in the school's face, right? It's just not. Parents are really not going to hold the school responsible. In an Orthodox school, parents might hold the school responsible if there was any sort of sanctioned drinking on Purim, right? On the other hand, the flip side is, in a yeshivish school, if a kid is acting a particular way outside of school, people will say, "Ooh, this impacts reputation of the school. My kid is now in a school that's associated with that behavior." Whereas in the modern Orthodox world, that's just a kid in the school doing that. That doesn't.
It does.
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure you're right.
I think it does reflect poorly on the school and on the community. I think circling back, if I were to summarize a lot of what we've said, is really the biggest takeaway for me is institutions and parents need to define what's right and wrong here. And parents need to be much more clear with their children today about what's right and wrong, because a lot of parents are scared to tell their children, this is okay, this is not okay. I'm not okay with this, like as you pointed out, and institutions also. And I think you're right that children should have a sense of shame around doing things that now they know this is in the wrong category, and if I get caught, I'm in trouble.
But
that needs to exist.
I think that only because you said that, I have to say something. I think it is unfair the way people paint schools with a certain brush. I think that, forget about modern Orthodox versus yeshivish. I think it's very easy to say, if your kid goes to this school, then this is going to happen. I think that's a big flaw in society.
Yeah.
And it's not a topic, again, we have lots of other podcasts that we've created from this conversation, but all of us have friends that send to different schools. I know most of my kids have gone to one school. I have some kids have gone to other schools. But I think that sort of, when you paint a school with one brush and say publicly, well, this is going to happen if you send to this school, it's not only communally irresponsible, but it's hurtful to your friends who send their kids to that school.
Wouldn't this, though, fall under exactly the same category of reputation that you spoke about earlier? Then it's just the way the world works, right? The same way you want to tell your kid, hey, look, if you act a certain way, you're going to build a reputation for yourself, and it could be unfair, but it's the way the world works. Institutions are subject to the same thing.
No, I disagree.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. For the individual, a lot of the brush that, I'll speak for myself, a lot of the brush that I was painted with, not all of it, but a lot of it, I brought on myself. Okay, I'm going to say that. It took a long time to, hopefully I've changed that opinion of most people over the past 30 years, but it took a long time. Schools have a lot of different children, a lot of different families, a lot of different issues. Schools deal with the families, in my opinion, on the most part, very responsibly. And they have to make tough decisions for each family as to how they want to deal with an issue or how they want to deal with a kid. To paint a school in a bubble as to this is the way, I think it's wrong. And again, we can't change human nature. Okay, people are going to say what they're going to say, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And it's awful for any institution when they say that. But I don't think it's the same way, because I can control the way I act. A school can control the way the rules are of that school. They can make that decision. They can't control the way 135 or 150 kids are going to act on any given year. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get sometimes a better class, and you're going to get sometimes a worse class. You're going to have certain teachers that leave. You're going to have certain people that make mistakes. Any school that's been around for 60, 70 years has lots of history. I just feel that when people paint a school because of a certain scenario, and to say, like you had said earlier, that that's the way people say that what's going to happen, in the modern orthodoxy where it doesn't happen that much, it does. Everybody has to worry about the reputation of their school, because the following year, when all the 8th grade kids are applying,
so what are you
gonna
arguing,
have to
though?
make decisions.
like, if you're the New England Patriots, right? And you've got I don't know, a misbehaving player, you cut him, right? Because at the end of the day, like, that's not the way we do business here, and everyone understands that. Like, are you like,
But you can't do that in a school. What I'm saying is,
are you okay with a school throwing a child out of the school purely because that child threatens the reputation of the school? Meaning, there are 150 kids in the school. 149 of them are wonderful, perfect children, right? Obviously, this is, hypothetical. One of them, right, is a problem. And you say, look, we got to cut ties with you because you're threatening the reputation of the school.
so this cuts to the core of my being, right? This is like everything that I think about, okay, given my own history as well as things that I've been involved with over the years. I think each case has to be looked at separately. I think that people have to have the ability to do good, just to not take in a kid because they may not speak the same language of our school, even though they're told it's a good school, it's a good kid, but maybe they just don't have siblings that have been successful, or they have parents that are in different situations. I don't want to get into specific situations, but I think every kid should have the right and the ability to succeed. If they don't, and if they are compromising the reputation of the school, then yes, the school has to go into lockdown mode. Okay, there's no question.
But at the same time, you think it's wrong communally that we do that. I mean, you think the schools exist in the reality where they do need to cut ties, but it's wrong communally where a school gets defined by that reputation. Meaning, you see the steer I'm pointing out.
I do see it, but again, one child or two children should not dictate what a school looks like. Sometimes I see, I don't want to get too specific, but sometimes I see certain kids dressed a certain way or certain kids act a certain way, and it could be 3 or 4 kids in the neighborhood, and then all of a sudden, you can't send your kids there because that's the way
Right.
all the kids are going to look.
Hoodies.
How do you take 4 kids and define an entire school on those 4 kids? So I think it's a fine line, and I think this is why it's so hard to be an educator and so hard to be a head of school more than anything else, because you have that weight on your shoulders as what is this kid going to do if? But I don't think they're a stira. I think that a school should not be defined by a couple of children. I think people speak sometimes without knowing, oh, well, half the kids do this. No, half the kids don't do this. But it's easy to say half the kids do that. However, yes, if a child is, let's use our case of alcohol. Okay, just if a child is told you cannot drink at a school function, once they drink on a school function, they get detention. Twice they drink at a school function, they get a suspension. If they drink a 3rd time, they can't come back.
That is a pretty permissive school.
No, okay, but
By my standards.
but I'm just giving.
I give detention for like showing up late to davening.
I'm just giving an example. Maybe there's 2. Maybe
Right.
there's 2 warnings. I can tell you, for me, I got a lot more warnings than those. But I will tell you that whatever the warnings are, as long as they're clear to the family ahead of time, and as long as the family knows what's going on, and it's not just a shock, of course the school has to go into lockdown mode. But everybody has to be treated the same way.
So there's the rub. That's the rub, that everyone has to be treated the same
Everybody
way.
has to be treated
because
the same way.
that's the problem, right? At the end of the day, there's no problem if you can create a policy and you're willing to enforce that policy for every student exactly the same way.
Right.
The problem is that in every Jewish institution I've ever been a part of, that is not the case.
I think in every institution.
In every institution.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
just
know- I
as
don't know
bad
if
in
it's not
Harvard
Jewish.
and in...
Yeah. I
only
don't know
worked in Jewish
Yeah, fine,
institutions.
but it's
Actually,
just
that's
as
not
bad
true.
in
I worked in finance for
I
a
think
little
in
while.
any-
But that was kind of like a Jewish institution.
In any institution, okay, you're going to get people that get more chances. There's no question. Okay, say no more. But and you're right. You're absolutely right. And it compromises everything when you perhaps or could compromise everything when certain kids are allowed to do things that other kids can't. This is veering off to a different topic. But to me, it hits me very, very hard when, let's say, if my kids were to go to a certain school, and somebody were to say openly, well, that school X, okay, does X, okay, with no knowledge of whether it's true or not.
Yeah, that's awful.
And that's why this alcohol stuff, okay, this is an easy target for that. Weed is an easy target for that. Gambling is an easy target for that. Frumkeit, is an easy target for that. Well, if you go to that school, you're not going to be as religious as this school. I can probably point out in any school, 30 to 35% strong kids in any school. So I don't know how that is said. But again, it's wrong.
Right. It's wrong, but it's also right. Meaning in the sense that reputations do have truth to them.
Yes.
Social environments do matter. Yosef and I have been teaching high school for a long time. What grade you end up in, which group of friends you end up having, has a huge influence on sort of where your social parameters are, what risks you're willing to take. So these concerns don't come from nowhere.
And the shidduch thing today, I don't know, because I don't know who tricked my wife into marrying me when I was 23 years old.
Right.
I wonder that all the time.
Yeah, I know. We everybody asks, but to be honest, the shidduch world today, I see with my own children, it's a very, very tough place to be in. It's very. I use the word humbling. It's a very humbling experience. And you make a mistake in 10th grade, like Rabbi Kurtz said, that can haunt you for a very, very long time.
Yep.
And the kids have to understand that.
It sounds to me like what we come down to is that at the end of the day, there's a certain, rules of the jungle, rules of the way the social, organizational, institutional environment works. And it's on us as parents to essentially make our kids wise to the harsh realities.
It's true, but and I say this about my own kids, and I've been blessed with great kids. On some topics, this might be one of them. They will listen to a Rabbi Kurtz more than they'll listen to me. Not because my kids don't listen to me, which I'd like to think at least 72% of the time they do, but because Rabbi Kurtz is not their parent, and he's very well respected in the community, and he was an educator for a lot of them. It doesn't only come from the parents. I think that this topic of being weary about your future, I think having a Rebbe or having a teacher that you respect in some ways in this area is very, very valuable. I had that. I wasn't in a space that I was ready to listen on these topics, but I think it's not always coming from the parents. Right. Each kid is different.
Right, but it's still, I agree with that, but it's still coming from a trusted, authentic individual.
100%.
As opposed to an institution.
100%.
Right, because institutions, it seems to me, don't really have the weight of authenticity behind them. Institutions are these, political animals that run in, different ways and have to treat people differently and have to worry about donors and stakeholders. And maybe there's valuable lessons for our children to learn in that, that's the way the world is and that's the world you're going to encounter. The true point is the more authentic role models you have, people who are willing to speak truthfully to what the situation is and how life is, those are the people that will earn trust going forward.
Even as adults. Look, I found myself a Rav 16 years ago that has changed my life in terms of the way I look at things. And I didn't have that before, okay? Even as adults, not only as kids.
Should we wrap?
Let's wrap it up.
Thanks, guys. This was fun.